Welcome, everyone, to this gathering of SSUC for Sunday, February the 20th, 2022. No matter who you are or what your week has been like, no matter whether you've been up for hours or you've just managed to sneak out of bed, no matter whether you've been with us online many times or this is your first time, you're welcome here. You belong, and we hope you sense that belonging and find what you need in our time together today. We, along with Sherilyn on piano, and along with Joseph and Noah bringing this stream to you today, I welcome you and invite you to take a moment of gratitude for the land. I welcome you from the SSUC building in South Edmonton, where we find ourselves on Treaty 6 land. We acknowledge that we find our place on this land in the midst of a context that is long and rich, but also painful and sad, but also hopeful and full of hard work. And so our acknowledgement of Treaty 6 land, or the land where you find yourself today, acknowledges all of that, acknowledges the history and languages and cultures of First Nations, Métis, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continue to enrich our communities and with whom we commit to walking in truth and in reconciliation. Many of you light candles at home as we light a candle here in this place, and I invite you now to light a candle as we light this one here. This candle will remind us of a number of things as we are together today. We'll let it remind us of the spark, the light that dwells within each of us and reminds us of our relatedness and our connection. As your eyes return to this candle this morning, may it remind us of the light of creativity and wisdom that is imbued in the power and the strength within each of us. Not only to transform ourselves from within, but to transform our communities and our world. And we'll let this candle remind us of the ordinariness of its flame, the evolving awareness of the sacred, the specialness, the value of all. So this light will burn among us today, in your homes, here among us, and we are grateful for it. And all of the reminders of how it continues, that light continues to burn in us.
Justice, our friends.
With that song, when we sing Stand for What is Right, it introduces us to our fifth winter theme in this series on winter and what wisdom we might learn from it. Today, we talk about winter justice, which is something we might not think about, those two words going together, winter and justice. But today, as we put those two concepts together, we think of what we might learn, what wisdom we might glean from the long, slow, and cold season of winter, and what that means in our seeking justice, in our working for justice, and our standing for what is right. I want to share a few invitations with you right now. We have had the opportunity last night to gather with each other over Zoom for our Little Prince dramatic reading presentation. It was wonderfully put together, and so many thanks to the cast and the crew and all who worked to make The Little Prince such a delightful entertainment piece last night. It will be posted on our YouTube channel, so when that happens, you can find it there and know that the opportunity isn't lost to see that wonderful presentation with so much hard work that was put into it. We presented that last night as a way to bring a highlight to one of our ongoing outreach projects. Every year we support the Bissell Center, but in the month of February, the coldest night of the year, is a national effort to support people who are homeless, hungry, and hurting. And so any donations that we received last night will go to Coldest Night of the Year at Bissell Center. And it's not too late to donate to that special cause. You can see different ways to donate on your screen. And if you indicate with your donation that it's for Coldest Night of the Year or for Bissell, we'll make sure that that gets to them with our donations from last night. It is time again for our online pie auction, just in time for Pie Day on March the 14th. We are now at the phase where we are calling for pies. If you can bake a pie or two, if you can purchase a pie or two, we are looking for pies within the next week, please. We have a deadline of the end of February. To reach our goal of 25 pies that we will then auction off starting on March the 6th. So please consider donating a pie, homemade, high-quality bakery pie, doesn't matter which. We would love to have your pies. Visit our website to commit to supplying a pie for our pie auction. Such a success last year, we'd like it to be just as fun and successful this year. Here is a message from Alison Brooks Starks.
Hello, SSUC. We've got two opportunities for retreats coming up in March, one at the beginning of March, one at the end. And I really wanted to highlight the one called Lodge to you because it was created with you in mind. It's up at Narrow Lake, and it's 24 hours solo time. But you have your own little cabin at this camp. You have your own lodge. So yes, you could be outside for that time, but you could also spend time in your cozy little lodge, just like a beaver in your beaver lodge. And you might ask, why would I do a 24-hour solo in a pandemic? I'm home alone all the time. I don't want more of that. Being home alone is such a different experience than intentional, contemplative time alone in nature. You'll leave feeling refreshed, rejuvenated, more at core. And a beautiful irony is that the cohort that you do it with really creates a lovely little community for that time because you go through this experience together. So it's a really great opportunity coming up. That's Lodge. There's also Burrow, where we're going to make snow shelters. It's a separate event. If you want more information about either of them, there's an info night coming up this Tuesday. So go to emberwood.ca, or you can access that through the SSUC website, emberwood.ca. Click on solos, and then in either of the event, you'll see the button to sign up for the online info night on Tuesday, where you can learn anything you want to know. All right, there's info on the website, and I hope you consider it. All right, see ya.
In today's Time for All Ages, a very fascinating story that comes to us from two authors, only one of which has the name Gandhi. I would like to introduce you to the book Grandfather Gandhi by Arun Gandhi and Bethany Hegedus. I'll continue reading this story, but first a short little introduction that gives a little taste and a little flavor, and with Arun's voice to start us off.
The world knew him as the Mahatma, great soul. To me, he was Grandfather Gandhi.
I had been at Ground Zero on 9/11. Looking for healing, I attended a talk by Arun Gandhi, grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. There, Arun recounted stories of his childhood.
When I was 12 years old, I journeyed to Sevagram, grandfather's service village in India. Raised in South Africa, where I was often beaten on the street, I was more familiar with anger and John Wayne than I was with peace and prayer.
We arrived at Sevagram, dusty and dirty. Father insisted we be taken straight to grandfather's hut. Bapuji sat serenely on the floor. I hung back, afraid to be in his presence, but Ayla took my hand and we rushed to him. We bent to touch his feet, a sign of respect. Grandfather gathered us to him in a big hug. He smelled of peanut oil. Arun walked the entire way from the Warda station, Father said. Grandfather stood and smiled his toothless grin. That walk is a test of character. I am impressed. My heart swelled as big as a balloon. I had made Grandfather proud. That evening I floated to dinner. The tin bowls and utensils we used clanged, making a funny-sounding music. I ate spoonful after spoonful of boiled pumpkin. It was mushy and bland, and I didn't like it, but what I liked less was sharing Grandfather. Sevagram was filled with people. 350 followers lived here. For the rest of the night, even as I washed and readied myself for bed, my dinner sat like a lump in my stomach. The Gandhi name was so much to live up to. I had passed my first test, but there would be others. What if I failed? Mother ushered Ela and me to bed. The air was so thick and hot, we slept under the stars to keep cool. I tossed and turned, wondering what the next day would bring. Finally, I fell asleep, after even the earth seemed to quiet. The next day, everyone awoke at 4 a.m. With the dark of early morning wrapped around us, we prayed. Silence filled the air. Everyone was still, but I was fidgety. The peace of prayer felt far away. After chores, it was time for lessons. I met Bana Salika, my tutor. "We have much work to do," he said upon meeting me. Someone, maybe even grandfather, must have told him I didn't speak Gujarati well. I stared at my sandaled feet. At home, I spent my study time practicing John Wayne's swagger. But here at Sevagram, there would be no movies. There wasn't even electricity. No one knew who John Wayne was. I'd tried to get the other kids to play bank robbers and sheriff, but the only game anyone was interested in was soccer, which ended up being okay. I was good at soccer, better than I was at Gujarati. That first week went by in a blur. I saw grandfather many times, but for most of the day he worked in his hut. Whenever I'd get a chance, I'd run a stick along the fence post outside, waiting for some alone time with the Mahatma. But I was always shooed away. Idleness was not allowed. Early in our second week, grandfather found me. I didn't have to go looking for him. "Will you walk with me?" he asked. There was always some aide, official, or follower around, but this morning there was no one. Lucky me. I set off after grandfather. His stride was quick, and each time he raised his walking stick, he asked me a question. He asked about my older sister, Sita, about how Ayla was behaving, and about life in South Africa and the cruelty that came with being separated by race. Eventually, grandfather asked about me. "How are you finding life here at Sevagram?" "The other kids tease me, and my tutor thinks I'm useless," I blurted out. "I try hard, but it is not enough." I stopped short of saying that I didn't feel like a Gandhi, that peace and stillness did not come easily to me. Even Gujarati did not come easily to me. Grandfather listened, and when I finished, he wiped his spectacles on his dhoti, put them back on, and looked me in the eye. "Give it time, Arun. You will adjust and go on to good things. I have faith." He said no more. We walked on. It wasn't long before an aide found us and escorted grandfather away. I should have known there were more important things than me. The rest of the day was just as disappointing. My pencil nub shrank to almost nothing, but since we took a vow not to waste, I couldn't throw it away. I held it, squishing my fingers, my hand cramped. Stupid pencil. After lessons, with the sun high overhead, I was glad to head to the soccer field. I wanted to forget about the ashram rules, forget about being a Gandhi. We played hard, as if the match really mattered. I was about to make a goal when Suman, an older boy, shoved me. His feet stole the ball as I lurched forward and fell face down in the dirt. Blood trickled from my lip. It tasted like tin. I snatched a rock and leapt up. "You did that on purpose," I shouted. "Didn't you?" Kanu stepped forward. "It was an accident, Arun," my cousin said. "Calm down." But I didn't want to calm down. I wanted to throw the rock, to hit Suman like he hit me. Everyone stared. How could he, a Gandhi, be so easy to anger? Their eyes seemed to say. I dropped the rock and I ran. Straight to grandfather's hut. "Bapuji," I cried. The same aide who had whisked grandfather away earlier was there. "What is it, Arun?" Grandfather set down his pen, pushed aside his many papers. It was wrong to come here. Grandfather had work to do, important work. I backed up to leave, and grandfather bowed. "Namaste," he said, not to me, but to the aide, politely dismissing him. A moment later, we were alone. "Tell me what has you so upset," he said. I did. Out came what happened on the soccer field, getting pushed, the rock, everything. When I was done, my head throbbed. Grandfather didn't need to say it. I'd never live up to the Mahatma. I'd never be at peace. Do you think Suman and Kanu never anger? Or that they never think injustices happen solely to them? Grandfather wiped my tears. Do not be ashamed. We all feel anger. But that wasn't possible. Suman and Kanu, maybe, but not Grandfather. Even you, I asked. Even me, said Grandfather. But Grandfather taught peace. I'd never seen him angry, not even now when I told him what I'd almost done. Let us spin, he said. And he sat before one of two spindles. Grandfather wasn't one for riddles. Father had often told me, but he was one for stories. One was coming, I was sure of it. I held the thin cotton thread between my thumb and forefinger, not moving, as Grandfather's fingers went to work. Have I not told you how anger is like electricity? I shook my head. It is. Anger can strike like lightning and split a living tree in two, he said. I saw myself on the soccer field, rock in hand, ready to strike. I saw the movie cowboys and their guns. Or it can be channeled, transformed. A switch can be flipped and it can shed light like a lamp. I saw Grandfather speaking before thousands. When Grandfather was angry, he didn't lash out. He worked to make changes, important changes for all, not just himself. He continued, then anger can illuminate. It can turn darkness into light. That's what you do, I said quietly, sure that I couldn't do the same thing. Arun, we can all work to use our anger instead of letting it use us. Grandfather stood slowly. He beckoned me to him, and together we stood at the doorway of his hut, looking out at everyone working as one. He hadn't told me I was foolish. He hadn't told me I was wrong, and he was right. He hadn't even forced me to choose lightning or lamp. But I did choose, and I would choose over and over from that moment on, like Grandfather. I did my best to live my light as life and my life as light.
Here's my song, Put One Foot in Front of the Other. And the verses are call and response. And here's how it goes. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Look up ahead. The path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared, and I'm scared too, but here I am, right next to you. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love. There you go. That's the song. I love you.
Maybe, like me, you've noticed that there's a lot of anger in the world just now. And maybe it's always like this. But it seems like it's in my face more than usual. The list could go on forever. But to name just a few, there's anger at the handling of the pandemic by our elected leaders, at the appearance of racist and white supremacist elements at rallies and protests. There's anger at the way our education system is meeting the challenges of teaching students in 2022. There's anger at the state of our healthcare system, its funding, its capacity, how we care for it, and the health of those who work within it. There's anger at the actions or lack of actions regarding climate change. There's saber rattling in Eastern Europe to the extent that make us think that we've learned nothing in the past 100 years. Today, I want to talk about what winter might teach us about how we confront injustice, and more importantly, how we deal with our own anger in the world, and how we might consider our own anger in a more healthy way. As people who seek to make meaning in life, two questions never go away. What do my values tell me I should do? And will I do what I should do? These are the kinds of questions that we don't answer once and for all, but are answered all the time. We might live by a certain set of principles. Those principles may be based on the best ideals and values that we've learned in our lives, but no matter how aligned we are with our principles, how attainable or not our standards, these two questions demand answers from us at every turn. What do my values tell me I should do, and then will I do it? And I would probably add a third. How? How will I do it? The ancient story of Cain and Abel has long given us a metaphor for asking these questions. So a little summary, a little recap of the story of Cain and Abel. Cain has killed his brother. Why is a matter of some debate, so let's back up the story. It started when they both brought offerings to their God, each according to their occupation. Abel, the shepherd, brought a sheep. Cain, the farmer, brought his crops. And as the story goes, Cain became angry because he believed that God noticed Abel's offering but didn't notice his own. Now, We don't really know how Cain makes this conclusion, and we don't know if Abel noticed the same thing. But we do know that Cain's anger over this perceived slight elicits a warning. And he's warned to check the source of his anger and be cautious what he does about it. This question is our first hint at the philosophical nature of this story. The storyteller places in God's mouth the question, what response will you have when you come face to face with either the shortcomings of others or the shortcomings of yourself? Will it be the temptation to respond with anger, with lashing out, with a response you'll regret? And if so, then there's a need to watch it, to keep your eye on that, to master that urge. But clearly, because we know the story, Cain cannot master that urge. So when confronted with the anger over this offering, anger towards both himself and his brother bubbles up, and he responds hotly, violently, and he invites Abel into the field in order to kill him. And after this violence takes place, we hear again a conversation between Cain and God. God asks, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain's response is not a factual answer. If it was, he would have said he's lying dead in the field. It's not a moral answer. If it was, he would have confessed to what he'd done. Cain replies with a very metaphysical answer. He says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" A slippery evasion of the real heart of the question. It's clear that his brother is of no concern to him, but in being sly, Cain reveals the purpose in the telling of this story. That question, Cain's reply, is the heart of this story. He asks the question that we all have to answer. What and who do my actions affect? Who am I responsible for? Cain asks this in the context of murder, but we have to ask it every time we're confronted with need, every time we're confronted with injustice, every time we're confronted with something we don't like, with suffering, with an appeal for help. At every turn, we have to ask that question. What and who am I responsible for? Am I responsible for some things but not everything? Surely not responsible for everything and everyone? Or am I? I must be responsible for more than just myself? These are the crux of that question in Cain's reply. Community organizer Ernie Cortez and others introduce us to the concept of hot and cold anger. Hot anger, he writes, pushes us to act immediately. Maybe irrationally, but definitely directed toward whoever happens to be right in front of us, which is often the wrong people. Hot anger isn't thought through, it isn't reasoned, it isn't rational, it isn't planned, it isn't focused. If we act on our hot anger, it's destructive, it's often violent, it's dangerous. If we hold our hot anger too long, like holding a burning ember in your hands. It doesn't hurt anyone else, really. It does start to burn us. And it cooks up resentment and hatred, destroying our inner well-being in the process. I think many of us would admit that in our less than stellar moments, we have exploded with hot anger. Only natural. It's not pleasant for us, and it's not pleasant for any who receive it. I would say also that most of us have witnessed hot anger being played out on our TV and computer screens in the last few weeks of Canadian protests. I preface this by saying that we believe strongly in peaceful protest. There's such value and purpose in everyone's right to gather peacefully, to address injustice, to call for change, to make our voices heard. But it is also not a public right to block healthcare sites or international border crossings. It's not a right if it infringes on the rights of others. That's not in the interest of all of us together. When we protest, we're acting for the good of all. That's what justice would mean to us, to act and to seek solutions that work for the good of all. Hot anger runs the risk, as I think many have experienced in these last couple of weeks. Hot anger runs the risk of joining a hasty protest. Not knowing who's really organizing it or who you're teaming up with. Maybe because in feeling like you're not being heard, you simply want to belong to a group, any group, who you feel will listen to you. And that's a whole other issue, isn't it? Our need for belonging and our need to be heard. Hot anger has led, at least in this part of the world, to a lot of ordinary folks discovering that they've joined a rally that ended up with stockpiled weapons and questionable ideology. And most of them quickly reassessed. The opposite to all this anger isn't to become pushovers and doormats for the world's bullies. It isn't to accept the status quo or live with injustice or simply say those who take matters into their own hands with a lot of hot anger is just the way it has to be, or we don't know what to do in response. Many of us have felt that way. What would we do in response to what we're seeing? When we cool our anger down, we are able to turn it toward our focus on alternatives, our paths towards change, on productive ideas, on community responses. Cold anger focuses on what we can do to change oppression, exploitation, injustice. It takes a breath. If only we could all collectively, over the past month, have taken a breath, have time for reflection, and when we seek to engage in some cold winter justice making, we'll do it with a different spirit. And when we do that, when we cool our anger, we ask different sorts of questions. These are the kinds of questions that our cold anger inspires. Why does the situation make me so angry? What experiences does it trigger and remind me of? You think when you're asking these questions, but I'm angry. I don't want to think about all of these cerebral, inner, going into my past questions. But this is what cooling our anger does. It helps us reflect on just why we're so angry and what it is that is being activated in us. Number 3, what does this situation make us dislike about ourselves, about our previous reactions, about the institutions that we value and respect? When we have all these emotions, we need to ask about what it says about us, what it says about the groups that we're a part of. Number 4, what parts of this situation harm or benefit me? And what parts of this situation harm or benefit others? What actions have had success in combating this kind of situation in the past? And what responsibility will I take in this situation and in possible outcomes? You see, these are questions about analysis, about knowing ourselves, and about knowing the injustice that we wish to fight. So what better time than winter to examine our anger with questions like this that just refrigerate our red-hot reactions and transition them into cool-headed and responsible anger that can lead to some positive change, we hope. So what do we do next? I hate to say it again, but winter is a slow season. And cooling our anger into strategies to work for justice is a slow process. Not because we don't care, not because the injustice isn't urgent, but because the work of relationships is slower than revolution. Because the work of listening and showing tolerance and compassion takes more time than orating on the steps and attaching flags to your car. It takes commitment to be curious about our own and others' anger, and being courageous enough to share the depths of our fears, our anxieties, and how that plays into our convictions. And doing all this in a compassionate and reasonable way with each other. To listen with compassion without tolerating the terrible behavior is a tricky line to walk. To hear fears without being enslaved by them is a challenge for any of us. And this is why there's no easy answers. To strategize and build relationships with those that actually have the power to change things, and not to simply anyone who will listen. This is why justice making is such hard work. And perhaps most importantly, we'll find ways to speak up. We can never allow the hottest, angriest, most extreme, and vocal people to be the only voice. We have something to add to the conversation always. It's easy to be silent. It's easy to quietly vent to other people who we know feel the same way as us. But rather, let's speak in ways that serve the good of others and widen the perspectives, sharing the values that motivate our lives without being ideological. It's difficult because we think we don't have the perfect words or actions. And I'm heartened by the ancient philosopher who once said, "Perfection is the enemy of good." In other words, we really can't let futile quest for what is perfect bind us and blind us to the good and serviceable alternatives that we can do. If I might be bold enough to offer a wish in this third week of February 2022, it's a wish, it's a desire, it's a prophecy for the coming months, then here it goes. I look at the history of straining and traumatic events in the world's past. It took Rosa Parks thinking about Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African American who was brutally murdered by two white men in 1955. She thought about him when she refused to move to the back of the bus in December of that year, 1955, which sparked the Montgomery bus boycott and in turn triggered the civil rights movement. I'm also looking back after U.S. President number 45 won the election in 2016. The Women's March claimed the narrative back to say that their country wouldn't be defined by this leader. I'm looking back to the tragic raids that inspired Stonewall and Pride marches. I'm looking back to the terrible deaths that led to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I imagine a day when these current protests have calmed, when all of us who value and respect our Canadian democracy and who want to seek changes and the righting of injustices, who value the voice that each of us have, will work towards organizing powerful and positive demonstrations. Not with an extreme minority, but with the vast swath of those who believe in a better way, who will march and speak that reality. It needs to happen. Regardless of who's leading us from Ottawa, from Edmonton, from Regina, from wherever, a statement must be made that says, no, this is who we are. Let's be reminded as Charles, with thanks to Charles, who sent me this lovely reminder this week of Jesus, the summation of Jesus' way of transformation that comes from Walter Wink. When faced with injustice, Jesus advocated for creative, loving, assertive, engaging, nonviolent resistance. We can and we must put that into practice as individuals and as part of spiritual communities. We are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. To say that is to ask who is our brother and our sister. To ask who is our brother and our sister is to explore just what we can do, what we should do, what we will do with our own power as people mutually responsible for each other. All of us intertwined, related, all of us strong, capable of change, all of us smart, willing to sit down with each other, to listen, to hear, to speak. All of us capable of influencing the world and making a difference. So we'll do well to listen to Grandfather Gandhi. Lightning or lamp? I encourage us to get the right kind of angry. The kind that we transform to make change, to illuminate, to light the way. This is how we will work for and be heart to heart with each other and the world, one day at a time. May it be so for me and for you in so many ways. As those who seek a path of spiritual wisdom, inclusion, and justice, we chart our future with our intentions and our commitments. In the face of injustice and hurt, we will not be satisfied with blaming the victim, pretending that nothing is wrong, or accepting that nothing can be done. We acknowledge the dangers of labeling any individual or group as other. We will not accept the excuses that have attempted to justify collusion, silence, and complacency, inhumanity, and atrocity. We refuse to accept cruelty and suffering as a path toward the good. We will seek a better way that works for change while alleviating pain. We will not be complicit with injustice, nor will we accept fear and violence in silence. We will speak and live in ways that disarm and bring understanding, equity, and peace. We will stand with victims and seek to understand those who victimize. We will not settle for easy answers. We will work toward learning and living the wisdom of those who teach peace. We will refuse to see violence anywhere as an act of divine judgment, a holy war, or the will of any God. We will seek to bring the light of our deepest convictions and compassion to outshine cowardice, fear tactics, and violence. May we live these intentions each day in all the ways we are able, We pray in the hope of peace, the work of justice, and the spirit of persevering love. In this season of winter, may the cooling winds inspire us to cool all that runs hot and destructive, and inspire in us a collective wisdom, a cool justice that we might bring to our lives and to the world. And in the days and the weeks ahead, may we indeed come up with our own ways that we will speak, that we will act, that we will nurture the relationships that bring peace and justice to our winter. May we go in peace to love, to work, until we see each other again. Be well and take care.